Today's episode of Design Today features a buddy of mine, Ryan Doss. He's a student up at BYU-Idaho. I met him a couple months back, and he's a bright kid. He's studying UX design. He's refining his craft, and I praise him for the steps that he's taken to do so. He reached out to me. We started discussing a presentation that I gave at Product Hive. That presentation was on knowing when to design something custom, knowing when to go native, that balance between understanding what the developers are in need of, all while trying to pursue the best user experience. He had some questions, and I thought, you know what? Let's get it on the podcast and let's discuss it. So this is going to be kind of a follow-up to that Product Hive presentation. If you enjoyed that, you might enjoy this. If you didn't enjoy the Product Hive presentation, you might enjoy this. You might not. It's going to be hit or miss. So give it a listen, and I'm excited to share some of these insights with you guys. Design Today. Here we go. Okay. Ryan, you're on the Design Today show. You know what's funny is I always think I'm going to rename it. Yeah. And so I get in this scenario where I don't rehearse introducing someone to the show. And then I go, man, that's kind of a dumb name. Design Today. You're on the Design Today show, huh? All right. Well, hey, Ryan, you're on the Design Today show. Yeah. Welcome.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
Ryan, you and I met through that. It was up at the, what is it?
The Young Professionals.
Young Professionals group.
Yeah.
Up at BYU-Idaho.
Yeah.
How did you hear about that presentation? Why did you come out to that?
So I was originally part of the Marketing Society.
That's what it was.
And then, so Young Professionals, their leadership and our leadership got together and said, hey, let's combine.
Cool. And do this. Are you still doing that on campus?
Yeah.
How's that club going? Is it a club or is it a society?
Society.
Does it make a difference?
I don't think it does.
Okay.
But it's going really well. They've changed some things. It's in its beginning stages. Nothing's perfect, but they're working with a lot of stuff. And right now, I just do a lot of internal design stuff for them. And yeah, they're taking off. It's been good.
Are you in the marketing program at school?
I'm not.
So what program are you in?
Communications.
Communications.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're the president of the Marketing Society?
Oh, I'm not the president. Just the internal designer, I think is what I would be called. Yeah.
Gotcha. And where are you at in your schooling?
I was an art major.
Okay.
Took some classes there and then switched my major to communications, and about a semester and a half into that.
And how much longer?
Probably about just a year.
Cool. What courses do you have coming up that you're excited about?
There's a really intense Illustrator class that I have coming up, and so I'm really excited. There's a couple projects on there that I'm really hoping to just bang out of the park. And then there is a coding class that it's just some basic coding, and so I really wanted to dip into that as well.
You know, it's funny, I've now been out of BYU-Idaho for almost 6 years, and I keep, when I just did our previous round of like internship hiring, I talked to a lot of BYU-Idaho candidates.
Yeah.
And it's just funny to hear how they've restructured and added new classes. Like, it's cool to see that they're willing to pivot, because those classes were not around when I was there.
Yeah.
So in the comm department, you've got an Illustrator, like you're talking Adobe Illustrator.
Yeah.
And you've got a coding class.
Yeah. So
as part of the communications department.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So they have a really basic level design class that just gives you real basics, how to make a square. And then this next one jumps 10, 12 steps into designing a realistic looking watch and some icons and stuff. So I'm looking forward to it.
That should be fun. So we had talked a couple weeks ago. You had listened to the Product Hive presentation.
Yeah. And
I know you had some questions that were kind of follow-up. That's initially how we had this conversation starting there online. And I wanted to use this podcast as an opportunity to address and kind of do a follow-up to that Product Hive presentation. So you had a handful of questions. Let's jump into that. What were your thoughts? What were your impressions after listening to it?
Yeah. I really loved how you keyed in on like where should you go native, where should you go custom, and having that discussion with yourselves. For example, you're talking about Amazon, and they have a custom search bar because that's their meat and potatoes. That's where you need to be. So I currently am working on the app that's going to be going out for BYU-Idaho, and it's going to cover every department. It's just got a ton of content in it. And how simple should you go? How complex should you go? And I don't have a lot of development freedom, but as far as like content, where in that sort of situation, the user research or figuring out what people do or don't want is something that I'm looking into. And so advice on that, really, as far as...
Let me understand the product a little bit better. So it's an app for who?
All of the students.
All students, regardless of department.
Regardless of department.
And the goal of the app is to...
educate them and show them what's available on campus.
Activities or classes?
Activities. Classes aren't included. But
classes aren't part of it.
But it does link out to your class schedule, or you can go to where you're going to do your homework and things like that as well.
Okay. And so you've got this persona, which is students, freshman through senior. Or are you focusing on somewhere in between?
It sounds like there's going to be a new student persona and then a enrolled student persona.
Okay. Both of them with the goal of helping them understand activities and happenings on campus.
Yeah, and where things are.
Okay. And you're trying to go back and repeat your question now, the content strategy that you're wondering about?
The content strategy. How do we determine when's it going to be too much? Because we started making this app, the people above me started sending out a lot of emails to every department. Should every department be getting a portion on the app, a feature or whatever it may be, or should we kind of limit it a little bit for the sake of simplicity and to not overload? Interesting.
So what type how much research have you done?
So far we've not done any.
Okay.
They've been trying to hold us back from doing that before we put it through and create all of the content, make mock-ups. And so there's been research done with just the department heads. So people who aren't necessarily going to use the app but have a lot of information on a portion of that app.
Sure. It would be interesting to do the same user research. Not the same. I don't know what the user research is doing, but it would be interesting to do user research with the target audience.
Yeah.
And I say that primarily because like the heads of departments, obviously they fly too close to the sun, right? It's like the CEO of a company. He loves his own product much more than anyone else is going to love your own product.
Yeah.
And so, yes, they're going to have input. They're going to have good insight into all the things that could be included. But what are the users, what value are they going to get out of it? I don't know how you do that by not talking to them.
Yeah. So that is our next step, is to go through and ask them, show them. And so my question is, do you show them everything and say, this is everything we've got? Should we limit it to this? Or should we give them maybe like a spreadsheet that just has each one and you can check off which ones you think would be important?
I almost don't think you show them anything yet. You've got ideas from the heads as far as what they're going to be wanting, but you haven't heard from them what their jobs to be done is in the app yet. I mean, you haven't heard from them the problem that you're solving. I think in hearing that, you might see like, oh, we initially thought that our scope needed to be this big, but instead they're only worried about this.
Yeah.
And this is the value that they're going to get out of it, which is a subset to the larger, but can't then the rest of that come in a V2 or a V3?
Yeah.
And can't we roll that out into a different phase as opposed to spending X amount of time, dollars, and all these features that they may not even care about?
Yeah. So there's a lot of concern there. And so I think we were talking earlier today about that, the circles, overlapping circles, Venn diagram.
Yes.
About business, designer, and development. Yeah. And how business maybe not having empathy for designer or that design process can really frustrate things and cause you to overpopulate. And so I think right now that's what I'm running into a little bit of.
Is that business has an idea of what needs to happen.
Yeah. And so they want to go big. They want everything on there. They want it all.
This is, okay, so now that we've simplified it and boiled it down to that is like one of the most common startup problems.
Yeah.
You look at any startup and I feel like people bang their head against this wall. And again, it stems from good people with good intentions, but they love the idea much more than anyone else is going to love the idea.
Yeah.
And so scope is massive.
Yeah.
And you start organizing and architecting all these things for this massive scope, well, then nobody's going to use it.
Yeah.
Or nobody's going to, let me just put it this way. They may use it.
Mm-hmm.
They may not.
Yeah.
We don't know until we get it in their hands and let them start discovering it and doing usability testing. And maybe even before getting into their hands, what type of research can we do to figure out this is where we think they're going to get the most value?
Yeah.
If I was in your position and I'm figuring out like how do I pitch these business guys on how to narrow down scope, I would speak business to them and speak time and money, because that's what they're going to relate to.
Yeah.
And so, okay, you want all of this. It's going to take X amount of time and X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
And it's a risk, because after doing our initial research, we see value in feature set A, B, C.
Yeah.
D, E, and F, question marks, and everything after F, we're not even sure. We didn't even get to that in our usability testing. Yet you've got G through Z that you want to cover.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest gamble. So if we stage this thing with, we know immediately A, B, C need to be addressed, that's going to take this much time and this much dollars, and we can get that out this soon.
Yeah.
If you want to start getting a little bit riskier, you look at things after C, D, E, F, whatever the alphabet is. And and then you say, and that stage is going to take this amount of time and this amount of dollars. And I think that actually speaks volumes to business. I run into similar issues when I start to put out features on a Gantt chart.
Yeah.
And say, you've labeled this highest priority.
Yeah.
It's a big project. It's going to take me about 4 weeks.
Yeah.
You've labeled this second priority, third priority, fourth priority. And now you gave me priority 5, which is a big priority. Mm-hmm. It's going to take me 5-6 weeks, and you want to bump that to priority 2? Okay, well, what was previously 2, 3, and 4 have now just gotten pushed back a month and a half.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I've seen people go like, well, no, we can't do that. Okay. Then what do we do?
Yeah.
I mean, the facts are the facts. It's going to take this amount of time, this much money.
Yeah.
And then allow business to help prioritize how they want to do those things. But I think speaking time and money helps business understand.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because we ran into a similar problem as well in the same organization, but totally different topic, but rebranding and kind of trying to build new media. We were building these stand-up posters, and we had 6 different programs, and it was trying to meld everything together amongst all 6 programs that are kind of under this one head. And so there was a complete rebranding. We needed to come up with a visual language and all of these things, and that became the sole topic of everything, while all these other deliverables like priorities 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that were due much sooner than what priority 1 would allow. And so it was interesting to say, okay, this is what that takes, and then down the road a couple of weeks, it's that frustration of, okay, well, I really need priority 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then having to just ditch priority 1 for a while. And leave it by the side. And
then you start to, you're talking a little bit towards like dependencies as far as like the Gantt chart goes. Like if priorities 2, 3, 4, and 5 had dependencies on branding being finished, and you want to scope that branding project to be a 6-week project, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are not getting started for a minimum of a month and a half. That's the facts. And it's not designers saying, sorry, business, I'm not doing this for you. It's, no, these have dependencies on this being finished. My hands are tied until that's finished. Now, if you want to say, we'll narrow down the scope to this, to allow 2, 3, 4, and 5 to happen sooner, okay, then we narrow down the scope. But I think you'd have success in speaking dollars and speaking time to a business.
That does make sense, because I see where that empathy of, that's where business, that's what they went to school for, that's what they've been thinking about, that's what their higher ups are talking to them about. So
the other thing too is, and to help them understand that, again, let's say they've got A, B, C, high priority, D, E, F, mid priority, and then after everything after F, like low priority and high risk. The executives, the business, whoever it is, they still need to have their opinions validated.
Yeah.
And so just dismissing them as like, they're not going to happen ever.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't sit well with business.
Yeah. No.
Like, I'm not doing this ever. That's not going to sit well. But if you can phrase it in a way like, we're going to phase this out. We're going to do phase 1, which is pretty defined,
Yeah.
ABC. Phase 2, DEF, loosely defined, and we'll define it further when we get to X point in this, in this Gantt chart.
Yeah.
And then everything after F, undefined.
Mm.
It's on our radar. It's on our list.
Yeah.
And as we get further down this path, we'll be able to discover how we prioritize F on in order to get the most bang for our buck, to eliminate risk and get the most bang for our buck. And business responds to that.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting dilemma, because I think oftentimes we want to paint business as, oh, they're just not listening. They don't know what they want to do. They're not listening. Well, maybe we're not speaking the same language.
Yeah. I think that sometimes it's the hard part is being that middleman, because you have the designer who you clearly understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're saying, hey, visual language, consistency, these things are important.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do, in the meantime, while we're still doing this, we need this other, smaller project done, these smaller deliverables done. I'm not trying to do some third party random design that, the next person's going to come along and say, well, why do you do this?
Mm-hmm.
We should make something cooler for the sake of making it cooler.
Yep.
And then you have the higher ups for the business side. You're going, hey, we need all these things done. We just need to get them done, and don't quite understand what the designer has this grief.
Right.
Of like, I'm not trying to do that. That's a, a waste of my time, essentially. And so,
yep.
I don't know. I think that needs to be better understood. I feel like it would be interesting if we were talking about BYU-I, they have these classes. I think that might help more in diversifying what each college is teaching.
Yep.
If business knew a little bit more about design, if design knew a little bit more about business.
And it's cool to see, again, in your communications department, you're learning a little bit more about design, and at the same time, you're learning more about developing. I was just going to make a comment that it's equally as frustrating from the business side as when you, as a designer, talk to development, and the development says, well, that's not possible.
Yeah.
Well, it's possible. But what you mean to say is it's going to be very difficult, and it's going to take this amount of time and this amount of money. And, so it is possible. Don't say it's not possible.
Yeah.
So at the same time, I appreciate the developers who are going, when they get asked those types of things, they go, well, anything's possible. What do you want to do, though? Because that's ultimately what the answer is.
Yeah.
And the same for business. Yeah, we could do A through Z, but let's look at the facts, and this is how we need to prioritize things.
Yeah.
Going back to the whole idea of the Venn diagram and how they overlap, learning to speak developer if you're a UX designer, and learning to speak business if you're a UX designer. I think designers are more prone to deploying empathy and getting ingrained in those worlds, because oftentimes I don't think you're going to get business learning to speak developer or business learning to speak design.
Yeah.
So somebody's got to start bridging these gaps. I think it's a good spot for UX to be in. I
do too. I think that, especially since I feel like a lot more UX designers are the ones that are going freelance. They're the ones that are having to figure out, an LLC or figure out how to develop something on their own, how to make their own website.
Right.
I think they're the ones that are probably pushed the most towards that. Whereas you see a developer and they have to have, some sort of aesthetic to design, so they may learn a little bit of that. But developer jobs are open everywhere. Yeah. Everybody's hiring.
Yep.
And business, I think, is much more, they know, I think they've got it honed in that they're maybe not visually there. And so they can focus really hardcore on their business side. And so it's maybe a little more difficult to empathize in other directions.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, I appreciate that question. It's a good one. I know you had a couple more on your list, and I want to make sure we've got time for some of them.
Yeah. So I think something else that I was talking about was, speaking of getting hired and doing those jobs, I'm in a position where I don't necessarily get to change the aesthetic, but I deal a lot with navigation and content. As someone who does want to be a UX designer, how do you deal with maybe subpar aesthetic, but having done a lot of work and trying to showcase that in a portfolio.
That's interesting. You're basically saying it's too ugly. I don't want to put this in my portfolio, but this is what I have to work with.
Yeah. Because I'm not on the development team, and they were like, okay, you get X, Y, and Z modules, and that's what you get to deal with. You can change the words on it. And so there's a lot of user research and content and navigation, but
well, fortunately for you, you're a UX designer and you're not a UI designer.
okay.
UX designer, you're designing adequate experiences.
Yeah.
And at least when I'm vetting candidates, I recognize that there are other things at play, and I'm trying to vet out candidates that have got a good feel for a user experience.
Okay.
So if you feel like your portfolio is going to be heavy on this solid user experience with the project you're working on, but you don't like the UI or it's not up to par, then do a different project that's going to be up to par.
Yeah.
Do a different project that's going to have better UI that you're willing to showcase, because I recognize the fact that not every project is going to showcase the best of everything.
Yeah.
Specifically when even for Domo, for example, where I work, there's not a ton of flexibility with changing the style guide on any given project. I work within a style guide.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's how I would be graded as a UX designer is, well, that style's interesting.
No. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
There's 15, 20 designers and a lot more other voices involved in the product that, no, I'm being graded as a UX designer and how adequate is the user experience. So I won't get too hung up on that.
Yeah.
Is your user experience with the given constraints still a solid user experience? And if on the side you don't like how visually you are represented, then do a different project that you're more satisfied with to give you that balance on your portfolio.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So then with the project, if you were to mock up a project, like make a new project, and you just create the UI for it, but the UX is bad, it's just the same way?
I would think of it the same way.
Yeah.
If I was a UI designer and I wasn't involved in the UX side of it, then my case study would reflect more of the UI thought process that went into it.
Okay.
And again, when you're laying out your case study on your website, I would specify these things. My role in this project was this, and now I got understanding. So if I think, oh, wow, that's a very pretty UI, well, that's a terrible experience. Well, that wasn't your role.
Yeah. Do you throw them under the bus? Do you say the UI? Do you open?
No, I wouldn't start my case studies with like the UX sucks on this one, but I did the UI. It wasn't my job to figure out the. No, I wouldn't. But I would speak to what your role was.
Okay,
that's enough for me to understand.
Yeah, and then just bank on someone who is understanding of that. Of you're not gonna you don't want to be hired by someone that doesn't understand that your role was this specific and it was done well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you hope, again, this is going to be, let me pause that thought real quick, because I had another comment that I was asked a while ago, and it was basically the portfolio question of quality or quantity.
Yeah.
And out of school, they had like 3 or 4 school projects.
Yeah.
And I was saying, you need more projects.
Yeah.
And they're going, yeah, but it doesn't help to have 15 projects. Like, don't put 15 projects on there. But if you're telling me the 4 projects you did represent your 4 best work you'll ever have, okay, well, you're not a designer I'm going to work with, period. But as you do project 5, does project 5 replace one of those 4 that you've done? Does project 6 replace one of those next projects that you've done? Sure, keep 4 on your website. But as quality improves, replace them. And I think the same can be said now with, going back to your comment here, whatever you feel is going to demonstrate your qualities best, put them into a case study, and then be deliberate in explaining, this was my role, this is what I fulfilled, and here's the process that I went through in that role.
Gotcha. So on that, I've always wondered, is there value in blogging? Like, so you're saying replace your quality, and that makes sense to have your portfolio, your items that you want to be seen. Is there value in having a blog that would show your process as a designer in life, as like you grow older and as you gain more experience, to show those different projects that you have worked on in the past that may not be as quality, but kind of show that you have grown as a designer?
So in that, blogging falls in my world under the content strategy of your own personal brand.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, again, as one looking to invest in the future designer who I may be hiring. I want to know, I mean, even things as far as like, if you did a blog post on the books that you read, I want to know, because it shows to me two things. It shows to me that you're out there hungry, trying to learn. Yeah. And it also shows me that you understand the value of personal branding. Yeah. Because you're willing to showcase, here's my process, here's what I'm going through. And I'm not just going to, and I think even my website still reflects that. I haven't gone back. I haven't worked on my website in like 3 years. And so the whole idea of like good case study projects on your website was just kind of coming around. But I didn't have time to do it at that time, and I still haven't taken time to go back and do it. So my site doesn't include case studies, and it's only just the end product. Yeah. So somebody who's evaluating it going like, well, what was your role? Like all I see is a pretty design as artwork at that point. Yeah. I don't think that's helpful. I think we know better now. Yeah. And if your case studies are going to showcase some of your best quality work, great. Now I like to see who you are. Yeah. And I can see some of that stuff in your blog, whether it's blogging or video recording or whatever it may be. I get to see a little bit more of you and what keeps you hungry and what you're striving to do in between these case studies. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. Because I mean, that brings back in a podcast before, I think it was either with your brother or I think it was with your brother, about hiring and who you hire as a designer. It might not be on quality of work, but it might be on personality. And so is that valuable to have your resume, your portfolio, and then kind of more lifestyle stuff all put in the same place?
Again, that you're hearing my opinion.
Yeah.
I totally say yes.
Yeah.
Because, and here's why I say yes. It's unfortunate, but I'm going to spend much more time with the people I work with than I'm going to with my wife and kids on a day, every day, right? Yeah. I don't get to spend 8 hours a day with my kids. Yeah. But I spend 8 hours a day with my coworkers, so they better be cool people. Yeah. So yeah, I do look for the blend of personality and the blend of, qualified candidates. It's actually part of the reason why when I was looking at hiring these interns at Domo, we had 30 plus candidates fill out resumes and portfolios and apply. Yeah. For the most part, dude, these 30 candidates looked identical on paper. Okay. They were coming out of school. They had a handful of projects done. They had started their own Medium articles and that kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah. On paper, they all look pretty identical. So the next phase and what we did is, once we kind of sifted through what we were looking for, is I had them do video interviews, and I would ask 3 different questions and they did a video response. Yeah. Truth be told, I didn't really care what their response was, but I wanted to see them approach a video interview. Okay. It was very easy to see the people who got shy and sheepish. It was the people who were comfortable with the awkwardness that I was personally drawn to, because it is kind of awkward. But that's, again, it gives me the opportunity to assess personality. Yeah. No, I had heard about this video blog or video interview thing. My one of my roommates, he just did one for a pizza place. Okay. And so they did a video interview, and I thought that was interesting. That I think more now we're looking at the whole of a person rather than just work experience. And so I think even more so than maybe schooling. Yeah, it's just experience and personality. Absolutely. And it's funny too, because it almost feels like, well, now you're just judging a book by its cover, right? You are making snap judgments based off of a video response. No, it's not like I hired the people who stood out to me in video only. These people still had skill, but it gives me another facet to critique them by or evaluate them by. Definitely. That's important. Yeah. Well, I think those are most of the questions that I had there. Other than that, I think one of the things that when I was listening to your podcast was just you had these rant sections, and we already talked a little bit about empathy. But what are your thoughts on how the design process plays into working within a team that doesn't necessarily understand
that process?
So I'm totally going to rip off some other great designers' content. I got the opportunity to hear Cameron Mole.
Okay.
You know that name? Mm-hmm. Cameron Mole works for Facebook. Okay. He's done the speaking circuit for a while now. He spoke at the awards conference, which I heard a couple months ago in San Francisco. And then it was like a month later, he spoke at the front conference here in Utah. And he delivered like the exact same presentation. Sorry, Cameron, I'm calling you out. It was the exact same thing. And but it was cool because it was an amazing presentation. Yeah. And one of the things that he talks to in that presentation that I couldn't agree more with, he talks about the 3 roles that a designer should fulfill. And one of these roles is what you're speaking to. It's the role of a connoisseur. And a designer's role is to fill the role of a connoisseur. And how I'm going to relate it back to this is, it is your job to elevate the ability of those around you. And developers, for example, they don't spend all day looking at Dribble. They don't spend all day reading UX design books. Yeah. They're coding, they're increasing their skill set. So to expect them to be growing as well in the design field, well, that's unfair. Yeah. It'd be like saying, how come you're not becoming a better developer because you design all day? Yeah. Sure, over time you might hear things and you might grow naturally, but it is your role then to help relay this information that you're learning and lead them into a better place. Yeah. Again, with taste, with skill sets, or with practice, those things. It's a designer's role to elevate. So if they don't understand the design process, that's on you as a designer. Yeah. It's not in their job description to figure out what is the design process. Yeah. So if you feel like you're butting your head against a design process that's not working, then as a connoisseur, help elevate those around you so that they understand it better.
So what, in execution of that, the difficulties are obviously they're going to be, well, that doesn't make sense. Just produce it now. That I feel like you run into a little bit of stubbornness. What do you do as a designer to move past that, to show them, hey, this is good quality design. This is a good way to go about this.
I don't know if this is the final answer or the magic pill answer, but I will say one of the pieces to that is some developers will be more keen to grapple on to what the designers are saying, and some may be more distant. Yeah. And I think a lot of it comes back to trust, right? Do they trust in what you are doing as a designer, or are they feeling a little bit reserved? How do you bridge that gap of trust? Goes back to empathy. Yeah. How well do they understand you? Do you understand them? It's like outside of the field of work, how do you build a relationship with somebody? Yeah. It's the same principle as now, except in the workplace. Once you've discovered that world of trust, then it's as easy as getting into these meetings and going, all right, we're going to start with this new upcoming project. And before I just spit out what I've gotten as far as what I've worked out, let me take you through my process. We did X research and looked at these jobs here. Yeah. And we've discovered that the problem here is this. You take them on that journey. And after discovering this problem, we looked at this information. From here, we looked at these ideas. And then basically they see you came from nowhere to here, as opposed to saying, I'm here, now get here.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's the exact same thing with executives. Yeah. If you go into a meeting and you're trying to build trust with an executive or the business, and you're just going to slide across the table like, here's my finished work, let's get after it. Yeah. They're going to go, I'm concerned. I'm the one forking out the money for this. Yeah. And I'm not sure I agree with this. Help me understand why I should agree. Yeah. Okay, we'll take them on the journey. And this is where we start, and this is why. And everyone, emotions are eased a little bit when they can understand, naturally, I would have evolved there as well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. No, I
poke on it if you're still having some reservation. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I think a lot of times you run into it almost feels like some artists or designers feel more like gallery artists, where they they've just made this beautiful piece of art, and that is the way that it ought to be. And maybe they did go through a design process, maybe they didn't, but this beautiful piece of art is the way that it is, and it's either perfect or misunderstood. And so you have to deal with it now. Where do you go in that portion of it?
That's on the designer.
That's on the designer?
That is on the designer. And I speak to that one purely because I've fallen in that trap heavily.
Yeah.
And I still catch myself in that trap.
Yeah.
But I came from the business world, right?
Yeah.
Where your books either balanced or they didn't.
Yeah.
Like the answer is right or wrong.
Yeah.
And then when I got into art, I was like, come on, this is a cakewalk. There's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
Like if a designer throws, or an artist throws paint on the paintboard here, it's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
It can be worth thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So I just immediately jumped to the other side saying like, well, who are you to tell me I'm wrong? Like this is right.
Yeah.
Well, then you start to learn more about principles and practices, and you understand there are more right answers than wrong answers.
Yeah.
It's not the designer's responsibility. It's not in your job description to be right.
Yeah.
That's not why you're hired.
Yeah.
We need you to come in here and be right.
Yeah.
Whatever it is in your head, fix what we've got.
Yeah.
I mean, I also see, I've talked about this one before too, new designers, when posed with a question of how do we solve this, they think they are failing if they can't spit out an answer.
Yeah.
I try to take the opposite approach, and maybe the developers I work with on a daily basis, maybe this even bugs them a little bit because they'll say, well, how do we fix this? I was like, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? This is your job. I was like, well, I don't know. You want me to have an answer? Give me a moment, and I'm going to go through the design process. I need to understand the problem. I need to, deploy empathy. I need to do my research, and then I'll come back with something. I'm going to visit with the stakeholders of this project, which will be developers, there'll be users, there'll be business.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'm going to formulate an answer, but it's not my answer off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So I don't think you need to be critical on, being right.
Yeah.
I think you should be critical on, did you go through the right process?
Yeah.
That sounded so cliche.
Yeah.
I don't like ending on that.
So
don't worry about being right. Did you go through the right process? It's like tweetable, and that's ugly. I don't like that. But ultimately, that's what I am saying.
Yeah, and I get what you mean. Like there's the process, and if you follow the process and you've eliminated this and through this design process, empathized and reiterated and such, you should have an answer that is right.
Yeah. And you may end up with an answer that's wrong still.
You might. Yeah.
But let me ask you this. Who do you respect more? The person who comes in and saying like, this is the answer, and you say like, I'm kind of confused because I see it a little bit differently, and they say, no, this is the answer. Or do you respect the person who says like, well, that's a valid point. I get what you're saying. And I wonder if there's validity in blending these things, and they're moldable, they're adaptable. I mean, it's an obvious answer, right?
Yeah.
So that's what designers need to do.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Legitimately, I just caught myself in that trap at work the other day where it was a big prototype that myself and another developer had been working on for like almost 2 months.
Yeah.
And it was very easy to get defensive about it because so much time was put into it.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, why did we do this? And I was like, well, we did it for a reason like 2 months ago. Stop pushing on it.
Yeah.
Okay. I get what you're saying.
No.
And is there validity in it? We'll continue to test, and we'll look to get more data points on that topic.
Yeah.
It's not your job to be right.
Yeah.
For sure.
I like that. That adds a lot of clarity because it's what I mean. I think we talk a lot in the design world, and we have all of these answers as to why designers are great and they're important in all of this, and sometimes I do think it goes a little bit to their head, like we are superiority, like we're not a piece of the puzzle, we design the puzzle, you're a piece in it, and like and so I don't know, I think sometimes it's a little difficult to push past that almost, and then to say, why don't we try to restart once they feel like they've already gone through the process, and you're asking them to start over rather than just reiterate. And
if designers are going to take that approach, they are just as annoying as the executive who says, no, do this.
Yeah.
There's not a difference.
There isn't. No.
It's just you are the one who then went and carried it forward.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, that's why I'm glad user research has become such a prominent topic.
Yeah.
Is because data speaks better than anything else.
Yeah.
Opinions are opinions.
Yeah.
Data can speak for itself. That's another one that I used to rely heavily on. And like, do we do this or do we do this? I don't know. Let's do them both. What do you mean? Let's do them both and we'll test it.
Yeah.
And that's a way to solve conflict, right? Well, I think this button should be this color. I think it should be this color. What do you think? I don't know. Let's do them both.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. We'll do them both.
I think that speaks a lot to the business where you get a lot of power out of evidence, where I think they are very much dealing with numbers, and that gives reasoning to your non-numerical values that you place in these colors and shapes that they, may see or take for granted.
Sure.
So,
well, I appreciate your questions. I think a lot of these are, reservations that I've had. They're reservations that, I've gone through, people to continue to struggle with. I continue to struggle with. So I appreciate you bringing up these points. Ryan, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, I think it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You travel all the way down from Rexford for this.
Yeah.
Incredible. You did get to shadow today.
Yeah, I did.
That was fun.
That was a good time.
I'm glad you came in.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, we're signing off. This is over.
All right.
Thanks, dude.